I didn't realize how tired I was until I said no and felt my hands shake afterward. It wasn't anger. It was the quiet understanding that something had broken between me and another human being, and it wasn't going to be fixed. For a long time, I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that I was overreacting, that this was just how life in apartments worked. But that night, standing in my doorway, I understood how easily you can become invisible to someone who's been taking from you for years. I live alone. Always have. My apartment isn't big, but it's mine. The patio especially. It's the only place where I can breathe without feeling watched. Directly above it is her balcony. An elderly woman. Quiet. Sharp eyes. The kind of neighbor people assume is harmless. From the first year I moved in, things started falling. At first, it was lint. Dust. Threads from blankets. I brushed it off. Literally. Then came socks. Napkins. Food-stained cloths. They'd land on my patio chairs, my plants, sometimes right by the door. Every time I picked them up, I walked upstairs. I rang her bell. I handed them back. She never said thank you. I told myself she was old, maybe embarrassed, maybe lonely. Isn't that what good people do? Make excuses for others? Over time, the things got worse. Heavier, more careless. Once, I found a kitchen knife lying in the snow on my patio, blade half buried like it had been planted there. I stared at it for a long time before touching it. What if I'd stepped outside barefoot? What if I'd had a guest? What if it had bounced differently? I returned it to her door. No note. No apology. Still, I said nothing. Because confrontation takes energy, and I didn't have much left. That's the part people don't see. How exhausted you can be long before anything actually happens. I was already recovering from burnout, the kind that doesn't announce itself loudly, but drains you quietly until even small things feel heavy. Setting boundaries was something my therapist kept talking about. I nodded every time. I didn't practice it. Then winter came. One morning, I opened my curtains and saw something white and twisted on the patio. At first, I thought it was a tarp. It was her bedsheets. They were tangled in the snow, soaked through, frozen stiff. Buried like they'd been abandoned on purpose. Days passed, then weeks. She never knocked. Never called out from her balcony. Never asked. I watched the sheets freeze harder, then disappear under fresh snowfall. Part of me waited for her to acknowledge it. Another part of me already knew she wouldn't. When I finally ran into her in the stairwell, I mentioned it calmly. I even rehearsed my words beforehand. I reminded her of the building rule about not shaking things over the railing. Her face hardened instantly. She told me I had to pick them up, that she couldn't walk through the snow. Something about the way she said it, like it was obvious, like it was my responsibility, made my chest tighten. I told her I didn't feel comfortable handling dirty, frozen laundry. I said they were already ruined. That's when she demanded to walk through my apartment. Not asked. Demanded. She wanted to enter my home, cross my living space, to access my patio, because of something she had dropped there. I felt a strange, delayed clarity. Why did this feel like more than laundry? Why did it feel like a line she'd been waiting for me to let her cross? I said no. Just one word. Quiet. Firm. Her eyes narrowed like I'd insulted her. I added, almost instinctively, that if she didn't shake things over the railing, they wouldn't fall. That's when she said it. Fuck, you're weird. Not angry. Dismissive. Like I was the problem all along. She walked away, shaking her head. I stood there longer than I should have. Was I weird? Or was this what it felt like to stop letting someone walk over you? Back in my apartment, I noticed something I hadn't before. The way she'd been watching through my windows over the years. The way she lingered by my mailbox. the way management had brushed me off every time I asked for help. "Talk to her yourself," they said, as if I hadn't been doing that my entire time here. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt, but because I realized how long I'd been shrinking myself to keep the peace. And how quickly peace turns into entitlement when you never say no. The sheets are still out there, frozen, silent, waiting. So is the question I can't shake. At what point does helping someone turn into betraying yourself? The next morning, I expected to feel relief. I didn't. Instead, there was this low, humming tension in my chest, like I'd left something unfinished. Not because I wanted to fix it, but because I knew it wasn't over. I made coffee and stood by the window, staring down at the patio. The bedsheets were still there, half visible beneath a crust of ice. They looked heavier than before. I kept thinking she would knock, that maybe overnight, something in her would soften. She didn't. Days passed again, but now, things felt different. I started noticing her more, or maybe I'd always noticed her, and just never let myself connect the dots. I caught her standing on her balcony longer than usual, looking straight down. Not at the sheets, at my windows. Once, when I stepped outside to take out the trash, I felt her eyes on me. I looked up. She didn't move. Why watch someone like that? Another time, I opened my mailbox and found it already open. Nothing missing. Just opened. I closed it slowly and felt that same tightness return. I told myself I was imagining things. That stress does that to you. But stress doesn't invent patterns. It just makes you finally see them. I emailed management again. Short, polite. I explained the situation. I mentioned the knife. I mentioned her request to enter my apartment. Their reply came 2 days later. They told me to be understanding. They said she was elderly. They suggested I compromise. Compromise what exactly? My privacy? My safety? I stared at the screen, waiting for anger to arrive. It didn't. What I felt was resignation. That familiar sense of being on my own. That night, there was a knock. 3 soft taps. My heart jumped harder than it should have. I opened the door just enough to see her standing there, wrapped in a thick coat, hair pulled back tight. She didn't greet me. She pointed past me, into my apartment. "I'm here for my things," she said. I told her calmly that now wasn't a good time, that the sheets were frozen, that I'd deal with them during my spring cleanup like I'd said. Her mouth tightened. "You're making this difficult," she replied. That word again. Like this was something happening to her. Not because of her. I noticed then how easily she stood there, how steady she was on her feet. This was the woman who couldn't walk through snow, the same woman who went on long holidays every year. I felt something shift. I told her, quietly, that my home wasn't a shared space, that I wasn't comfortable letting anyone pass through it. Her eyes flicked past me again, scanning the room. "I just need to step through," she said, as if it were nothing. What would have happened if I'd said yes? I didn't ask the question out loud, but it echoed in my head. I repeated my answer. Number. Her face changed. Not angry. Cold. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "You know," she said. "Neighbors help each other." I looked at her and realized something that made my stomach sink. She didn't see me as a neighbor. She saw me as access, as a hallway she could walk through when it suited her. I told her the conversation was over. I closed the door. I locked it. I slid down against it and sat on the floor longer than I'd like to admit. My hands were shaking again. Why did standing up for myself feel like I'd done something wrong? That night, I dreamed my apartment had no walls. People walked through freely, tracking snow and dirt behind them. No one looked at me. I woke up before dawn, heart racing. The sheets are still there. So is she. And now there's something else. A quiet understanding that once you stop being useful to someone, they don't just walk away. They watch. They wait. They test. After that night, I started changing small things without meaning to. I closed my curtains earlier. I double-checked my locks. I stopped sitting on the patio, even on clear days. It bothered me how natural it felt to shrink again. I kept asking myself if this was really fear or just old habits trying to come back. The ones that tell you it's easier to give in than to hold your ground. One afternoon, as I was working from home, I heard something hit the patio. A dull thud. My stomach dropped before my mind caught up. I stepped outside carefully. Another item from above. This time, it was a small bag of trash. Used tissues. Crumbs. Something sticky leaking through the bottom. I stood there, staring at it. Was this an accident, or was it a message? I waited. Nothing else fell. No voice from the balcony. No apology. I carried the bag inside and left it by the door. I didn't throw it away. I didn't return it. I just left it there, like evidence. That night, I couldn't focus on anything. My thoughts kept circling the same question. Why did it feel like I was being punished? I thought about all the times I'd helped her, all the times I'd made it easy for her to ignore the rules. Maybe that was the real mistake, not saying no sooner. A few days later, I ran into her again. This time, she smiled. It caught me completely off guard. "Cold out there," she said casually, as if nothing had happened. I nodded, unsure what game this was. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "I might need to wash some things soon," she said. "I hope you won't be difficult again." The word landed heavier than the trash bag. I felt something snap. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet resolve settling in. I told her that anything that fell onto my patio would stay there until I cleaned it. That I wouldn't be returning items anymore. Her smile disappeared. "You don't have to be like this," she said. "Like what? A person with boundaries?" She walked away without another word. That evening, management called me. They said there had been a complaint, that I was being uncooperative, that I should try to keep the peace. I asked them if they would be okay with a neighbor walking through their apartment. There was a pause on the line. They changed the subject. After the call, I sat in the dark, listening to the building's familiar noises, footsteps, pipes, distant voices. I realized something then. This wasn't just about her. It was about how easily people side with whoever makes the least noise, how silence gets mistaken for agreement. The sheets are still frozen outside. The trash bag is gone. I don't know when she retrieved it. Sometimes I catch movement above me on the balcony. Sometimes I don't. I don't feel victorious. I don't feel proud. I feel tired. Tired of needing permission to feel safe in my own space. Tired of being told that endurance is kindness. And tired of knowing that the moment I finally chose myself, I became the problem. Spring came slowly that year. The snow didn't melt so much as it retreated, inch by inch, like it was reluctant to leave. When the ice finally loosened its grip on the patio, the bedsheets were revealed again, gray, stiff, stained beyond recognition. They didn't even look like fabric anymore, just something forgotten. I stood there with gloves on, staring at them, thinking about how long they'd been part of my view, how something so small had managed to change the way I felt inside my own home. I folded them as best I could, not out of kindness, out of habit. I placed them in a bag and carried them upstairs. Her door was closed. No sound from inside. I left the bag outside her door, just like I'd said I would. As I turned to leave, it opened. She looked at the bag, then at me. Her expression wasn't angry. It was offended. You could have just helped, she said. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of anything else. I nodded once and walked away. Behind me, I heard her door slam. That night, I sat on the patio for the first time in months. The air smelled like wet concrete and early flowers. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, I felt hollow. Because the truth was, I hadn't won anything. I'd just stopped losing. Sometimes I still catch her watching from above. Sometimes I don't look up. Management never followed up. The rules stayed on paper. And I learned something I wish I hadn't had to. That not all betrayals come from people you love. Some come from strangers who decide your boundaries don't matter. And the quiet regret that stays with me isn't about saying no, it's about how long it took me to finally say it.